Petty Motorsport sold. Richard Petty's NASCAR team has been sold again. We've got all the details, plus a couple of other news and notes from around the racing world. Let's get into it. So Formula 2 driver Jack Aitken will test for Ed Carpenter Racing on December 6th at Sebring International Raceway in the IndyCars. He had been previously rumored to test for AJ Foyt Racing, but obviously with the Air Force leaving Ed Carpenter Racing, that opened up an enormous spot on the IndyCar grid, and now that is the hottest seat that everybody's trying to join. Speaking of joining, Aitken will join Nick DeVries, who will be testing with Meyer Shank Racing, Stoffel Van Dorn, who will be testing with Arrow McLaren SP, and Callum Ilott, who will be testing with Juncos Hollinger Racing on December 6th. Andretti Autosport will campaign an entire 2022 season of IMSA WeatherTech sports car racing in the LMP3 division for next year. Now, it's important to note that Andretti Autosport is not planning on staying in the LMP3 division. They are looking actively for an LMDH program starting in 2023, though there has been no announcement on that front at the moment. Dalton Kellett announced today that he is returning to AJ Foyt Racing in IndyCar for next year and for the full season. He will join already announced Kyle Kirkwood, Indy Lights champion, and a possible third driver on the team next year. But probably the reason you clicked on this video is the somewhat left field announcement that Richard Petty Motorsports has been sold to GMS. Here is the press release, a very short one that was released today. This statement comes from Mari Gallagher, who of course owns GMS. Richard Petty Motorsports has agreed to sell a majority interest to Mari Gallagher, owner of GMS Racing. 2 charters are included in the agreement and will be operated during the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series season. This is a special moment for both organizations as the next-gen car allows for a new chapter to be written. Now, this is an important distinction to make, that this Richard Petty Motorsports, if you weren't already aware, is not the Petty Enterprises that made the Petty name famous from their home base in Level Cross, North Carolina. Now, that team ceased to exist in 2009. They merged with several other teams, in fact, very famous teams at that, Robert Yates Racing and Evernham Motorsports, to name a few. Eventually, those 2 famous names, Yates and Evernham, faded away, and only Petty's famous name remained in the current iteration of the team. Now, it's very important to note that the 2 charters that GMS will be receiving from Richard Petty Motorsports are the number 43 and number 51 charters. Now, if you didn't already know, one of the Rick Ware Racing charters is owned by Richard Petty, leased to Rick Ware Racing. Now, the presumption would be that the number 94 car of Ty Dillon would get the number 51's charter, and the number 43 would continue with Eric Jones, just this time under the GMS banner, possibly with the Richard Petty Motorsports name still attached to it, though it would be the 3rd iteration of a Petty Motorsports team. Now, there's some interesting notes from Bob Pockris on this, particularly on the financial side of things. Now, Pockris is reporting that Richard Petty Motorsports actually lost around $2 million from late 2020 through September 30th of this year. I think you guys will remember that at that time, Bubba Wallace, who, like him or not, is a massive draw for sponsors at this point, left the team. Eric Jones joined them, and you have to think that that had something to do with this. However, the total assets of the team are valued around $30 million, and it's reasonable to assume that around $20 million of that is likely the value of the 2 charters. That has been what charters have been selling for. I believe Colleague Racing bought theirs, as reported by Dale Earnhardt Jr., for around $10 million each. And we know that Chip Ganassi recently sold his team to Trackhouse, Team Trackhouse, for an undisclosed amount of money, but it's reasonable to assume that it was a massive amount of money because of the fact that Chip has repeatedly said that team was not for sale at the time. Now, speaking on the issue I just mentioned about the 43 sticking around in NASCAR, Pockrass believes that the famous 43 and Petty name will remain attached to the team. But we will not know for sure until the official press conference, which is slated to take place next Tuesday. Now, one thing I've mentioned to you guys several times over the last probably, well, I guess it's been 2 years now. Ever since the next-gen car, we began to kind of realize what it was going to be. And even really, if you think back to it, when the charter system was stuck in place. Because 2022 is going to be a totally different NASCAR than you're used to. I said this about the end of 2021. If you enjoy anything about the current product of NASCAR, and I understand, like, I'm like the capital of bitching. That's why you guys watch my NASCAR videos. And, you know, there's a lot of bitching to be had about NASCAR. But the product is fundamentally changing. And it's obvious, too, because we've seen this with several teams now, several charters and several teams entering and exiting the sport. There are some people who are deciding to sell out now, and there are some people who are deciding to buy in. Now, the question is going to be, as this kind of moves on, who's making the right choice of selling out and who's making the right choice of buying in? My opinion at this point is that the charters are as high value as they're going to be. I don't think we'll see them higher than $10 million because my question will be, where will the demand be? Now, this doesn't also bode very well for car counts because the less non-chartered teams there are, and I'm not sure, I think there may be 3 or 4, which would, of course, get us to a full 40-car grid at the Daytona 500, but not much more than that. And I kind of suspect, well, I don't just suspect, it's pretty obvious where things are going, right? The charter teams are going to be perhaps the only teams left in NASCAR. And if you don't have a charter, you probably won't be invited. And even if you are invited, you're not going to be, well, you're already not getting very much money. And again, and I say this, and again, you can age NASCAR it in 5 years. But I don't think the TV deal that will be coming up, I think in 2025, that'll be the first year of the new TV deal. It'll, of course, be negotiated before then. I don't think it's going to be nearly as much money as they're getting now. And I think that's why you see NASCAR kind of changing a lot of their business models. And also kind of revitalizing some tracks like, say, Rockingham or North Wilkesboro and positioning themselves to have some things that will excite fans in the future. Because I think when you look at the future of NASCAR, it's going to be extremely different. And this coming 2022 season is going to be kind of the ground zero for seeing this change begin. You know, it's kind of like the old NASCAR is dead, long live NASCAR. That's kind of what last year's season was. It was the end of whatever you used to think NASCAR was like. And this year is the beginning of whatever the new NASCAR is. And it's kind of weird because I do think as well, like the fact that we've had just a couple of tests with the next-gen car and really especially so with a full field. There really hasn't been many full field tests. Of course, we covered the one at Charlotte Motor Speedway on the oval, which, by the way, they're making changes apparently. They were not happy with the way the cars were running together on the 1.5 mile tracks. More horsepower or less downforce, maybe. I don't know. I'm just a lowly YouTuber. I don't know anything. Yeah, it's going to be very different. I'm going to be very interested. Again, I almost want to say, oh, I can't wait to see what the Clash brings. But the Clash isn't going to be representative of what to expect from the week-to-week NASCAR racing with this next-gen car and what the new era is going to look like. And again, it's going to be the Daytona 500 where we're going to find out what this car is made of and what the future holds for NASCAR. Very, very interesting times. So let me know what you think of all of this down in the comments section below. Richard Petty Motorsports sold again. What do you think of the charter system as well? Because I think there's undeniable benefits to it. Namely, there's 10 million reasons to like the charter system right now if you have a charter. But do you think the charters will hold their value? And do you think that that value is worth the expense of the independent teams in NASCAR? Love to know your thoughts, and we'll see you in the next video.